The Unluckiest Person. A Story of Fines, Debt, and the System That Destroys Lives. By R.M. Hubbuck. A Normal Life. Daniel took a deep breath as he stepped into his small apartment. It wasn't much, just a one-bedroom flat in a run-down part of the city, but it was his. The heating worked most of the time, the fridge had food in it, and as long as he kept his head down, he could afford the rent. Life wasn't easy, but it was stable. He worked at a warehouse, stacking shelves and loading vans for just above minimum wage. It wasn't a dream job, but it paid enough for rent, food, and the occasional night at the pub with his mates. Like most people, he lived month to month. There was no savings account, no safety net, just the hope that nothing unexpected would happen. But something did happen. One morning, as he left for work, he saw the small slip of paper tucked under his car's windscreen wiper. A parking fine, £65 if paid within 2 weeks, £130 after that. Daniel sighed, already feeling the stress creep in. Just what he didn't need. He had rent coming up, and his electricity bill was overdue. He could pay the fine, but it would leave him short for the month. Maybe I'll wait a couple of weeks, he thought. I'll sort it later. That was his first mistake. The snowball begins. 2 weeks passed. Daniel meant to pay the fine. Really, he did, but every time he looked at his bank balance, he put it off. Rent took priority, the electric bill was higher than expected, and food wasn't getting any cheaper. Then the letter arrived. A final notice. The fine had doubled, now £130. If he didn't pay soon, it would go to court. His stomach sank. He grabbed his phone, checking his banking app. £85 in his account. Rent was due in 4 days. He did the maths. Paying the fine meant risking an overdraft fee. Paying rent meant ignoring the fine a little longer. He chose rent. After all, what's the worst that could happen? Court and the trap. A month later, the letter came. Notice of court proceedings. Daniel's chest tightened. Court? Over a parking fine. He sat in the waiting area, surrounded by others. A single mother was arguing with a clerk about a council tax fine. An older man sighed as he clutched a letter marked, "Final Warning." None of them looked like criminals. When Daniel's turn came, the judge barely glanced at him. "You failed to pay the outstanding fine. With court fees and penalties, the total now stands at $450. Daniel's head spun. $450? I don't have that. The judge didn't blink. Then further enforcement action will be taken. Outside the courthouse, he met Tom, a delivery driver who had just been fined for a bus lane violation. "I didn't even know I was in a bus lane," Tom muttered. The sign was covered by scaffolding. Daniel shook his head. "What are you going to do?" Tom laughed bitterly. "What can I do? They've got me." The bailiffs come. A week later, Daniel came home to a bright yellow letter shoved through his door. Final warning. Enforcement action imminent. Bailiffs. His heart pounded. He had heard stories about them, how they could take anything of value. He rushed inside, locking the door behind him as if that would help. He pulled out his phone and Googled, "Can bailiffs take my stuff for unpaid fines?" The answer made his stomach drop. Yes, they could. The next morning, his car was gone, towed by bailiffs. He was supposed to be at work in an hour. Now he had no way to get there. And just like that, he lost his job. Eviction notice. Without his job, rent became impossible. His landlord wasn't cruel, but he wasn't a charity either. "I can't keep you here if you can't pay," he said, handing Daniel a notice of eviction. "I'll give you a month to sort something out." Sort something out? Like what? With no income, no car, and no savings, Daniel spiraled. One night he met a homeless man named Peter. "You all right, mate?" Peter asked. Daniel sighed. "Not really." Peter chuckled. "Let me guess. Started with a fine?" Daniel frowned. "How did you know?" Peter pulled his tattered coat tighter. "Because that's how it starts for most of us." Prison for poverty. One night, a police van pulled up beside him. Daniel Carter. He turned. 2 officers approached. We have a warrant for your arrest, failure to pay court fines. Daniel laughed bitterly. You're arresting me for being broke. 2 hours later, he was in a prison transport van. Inside the holding cell, he met Michael, a delivery driver jailed for unpaid speeding fines, and Jay, a single father who got locked up over council tax debts. Michael shook his head. This isn't a prison, it's a debtor's jail. They just don't call it that anymore. Jay scoffed. They should? Same shit, different century. Freedom, but no future. When Daniel was released 2 weeks later, there was no home waiting for him, no job, no money, just the streets. The cycle was complete. The fight back. In a soup kitchen, Daniel met Maya, a volunteer handing out leaflets. Know your rights, the flyer read. Fight back against the fines. For the first time in months, Daniel felt hope. With Maya's help, his story hit the news. Man jailed over fines he couldn't pay. How the system profits from poverty. Under pressure, the government launched an inquiry. Some debts were wiped out. New laws were promised. The realization. 1 year later, Daniel walked into a polling station. He put his X in the box, voting for change. But as he left, he saw Peter, still on the streets. Daniel had escaped, but the system was still there. And the fight was far from over. The end.
Hey there, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe. It only takes a few clicks and means a lot to me. Thank you.